You're listening to the Talking Headways Podcast Network.
Talking Mondays. Keep moving on. Keep moving on. Talking Mondays. Keep moving on. Keep moving on. Talking Mondays. Keep moving on. Keep moving on.
Happy Monday. This is Mondays at the Overhead Wire, sponsored by our super generous Patreon supporters. I'm Jeff Wood, your host, and joined by Han Solo. That's right. Every Wookiee's favorite right-hand man is here to talk about the news. I've got 3 episodes with guests coming up, including Chrissy and Tracy and Kate, so stay tuned for those over the next few months. But in the meantime, we are Han Solo. So as we do when we're Han Solo, we chat about some of the podcast episodes we did and will do in the future of Talking Headways, which is our Thursday show. Calvin Thigpen and Isabel Hugevin talked with us about secondhand electric bike sales recently, and I got to ride a bike with Calvin as well just after we chatted. So I recorded the ride on audio, so I might post an edited version of that soon as well. My first e-bike ride. I decided to get a microphone and put it on while I was riding. We'll see how that turns out. I still haven't listened to it yet, but I know that I did it, so it's possible that might come out at some point. Brent Todderin, Tom Flood, and Grant Ennis join us to discuss the Urban Truth Collective. Today, they've just released their first campaign from that program against 1-hour cities, which is really fascinating to think about how they flipped it around, the conspiracy theory against 15-minute cities, and pushed it against an hour city where you're forced to drive. Benjamin Fong will be on this Thursday to talk about Amazon's urban logistics. It was super fascinating to talk to him about it. He wrote a piece in Urban Omnibus and has been thinking about this quite a lot, logistics and how these fulfillment centers and everything are situated, how they generate traffic, how they generate all this other stuff related to how we move around and the process and all that stuff. So it's really fascinating stuff. I hope you guys get a chance to learn as much as I did by listening. I had a bunch of dumb questions, but hopefully it's all worth it in the end. Michael Pollack will be on next to talk about his book, Sidewalk Nation, all about sidewalks. I'm looking forward to that. Longtime friend of the Overhead Wire blog since early days in 2008s, 2009s, 2007s. Ryan Avent is coming on the show to talk about his new book as well. And I've also got a long list of episodes and articles that I want to have the authors on to talk about in my spreadsheet. So we'll get to those soon. The spreadsheet's very, very big. I don't know if I'm ever going to get to all of the people that I want to talk to, but if you have a suggestion as well, let me know. Send in the suggestion, theoverheadwire@gmail.com, and we'll see if we can't fit it in. I appreciate previous suggestions. We've tried to accommodate some of those. Some of them are really great, and so hopefully folks have. If you have an idea, send it my way. I can't promise again that it will be done, but I always appreciate the suggestions. So send them my way if you get a chance. But we've got a long list of people I'd like to talk to as well. Okay, thanks again, everybody, for ordering bus and bike scarves. If you'd like to order one, just head on over to theoverheadwire.com or email me at theoverheadwire@gmail.com. Just sent one out today, a green bus scarf to someone here in the Bay Area. Also, I've been loving the pictures of folks wearing scarves at the events and rallies and things like that. That's what they're there for. Keep sending those pictures in. I really appreciate that too. I'm still trying to work on that new design. I started designing something, and then Tracy made a request for gaiters, and they seem a bit hard to get logos on, but I'm still looking into it. Next time she comes on the show, well, maybe before the show starts, I'll get her to take a look at what I found. And as we always note, we really thank everyone for supporting the show, whether that's on Patreon, patreon.com/theoverheadwire, or buying books off the bookshop site. You can support the show by going to our store and searching and ordering any book you want. It really helps us out, and I appreciate folks who have been doing that. bookshop.org/shop/theoverheadwire. Some amazing person decided they were going to get like 10 books a few weeks ago. Thank you, big reader. We appreciate that. And I hope you're enjoying reading the ones you got, because you should have gotten them by now, although some of them are on back order. I know that because they're very popular books. One of the most popular books lately has been Chris and Melissa Bruntlett's recent book. That's been very popular on the bookstore, and a few others as well. Also, if you want to order a Cars or Cholesterol t-shirt or any merch that you can dream of, you can do so through TeePublic, with the congested heart image that Richard Wazinski designed, bit.ly/Cars or Cholesterol. You can find Richard on Instagram at Dick David Sketches. Go check that out if you get a chance. all these things make great gifts, so you can order them up for you or for somebody else as well. I have been saying that you should order some of the bike scarves for some of your enemies, but that might be maybe a little bit too forward. We also strongly suggest folks sign up for the newsletter. We've got a new YouTube explainer up describing how you can get into the archive and all that stuff. And also, if you haven't already, again, we appreciate your support on Patreon. You can get the show for free of outside ads for just $1 a month. That's just 25 cents an episode, or even less if you listen to the Monday show. We'll talk a little bit later about that as well. But I really appreciate folks who have become Patreon members and those who are trying to get away from the advertising that we have on here. And also, it was really funny. We posted Grant and Tom and Brent's episode this last week, and I think we got a couple of new listeners. And if you're listening to this Monday show because you came from that episode, we appreciate that. But somebody was like, "Oh, funny, we talked about like how car companies are very repetitious in their advertising, so why can't urbanists do the same and repeat things over and over again?" Because I guess Brent has been yelled at a few times for putting out stuff on social media multiple times every month. And somebody got a car ad. Somebody got a car ad. Honestly, I have no control over the ads and what goes in there. I can kind of control. I can say no politics. So I think during election season and stuff, you can get no politics. The people at Libsyn get grumpy at me. They're like, you can put more ads, more higher paying ads in your feed if you want to do these other ads. And I'm like, no, I don't want that. My listeners don't want that. You guys don't want, like, right now in California especially, you'd get like a ton of Tom Steyer ads and Shoyket Chakrabarty ads here in San Francisco. And I just don't want to do that to you. And if you ever get one of those ads, let me know and I'll give them a hard time. We do want advertising because it does help us pay for hosting and all that stuff, and for Sophia to edit the Thursday show and everything. I also know that you all don't like ads that much, or the car ads for that matter. Although the car ads, I don't think any of you all are really going to go out and buy a car because of a car ad. So basically, they're just giving us money to listen to them talk. You guys all get it. You all are discerning members of the public. I know that. There's something to be said for being blasted all the time with paraphernalia. I mean, paraphernalia and propaganda. But there's, I know you all, and you all are very discerning listeners of the show and understand that car ads aren't going to sway you. Thanks to everybody who listens. Let's get to that show that you are waiting for, which is the news. This is episode 190. We are live and in session. We're getting real close to that 200th episode of the Monday show. That's crazy. We've done 575 episodes of Talking Headways, and we've done almost 200 shows of Mondays at the Red Wire, which is over 750 shows. I am not doing the math correctly. Obviously, there's more than 750 in there, but that's pretty amazing. It's crazy. We're almost probably getting close to 800 actually, which is bonkers how many shows we have. But that's good because we have all these evergreen shows, and if you want to go back and listen to some of the oldies and goodies, they're all there in the archive. If you want to find it on the web, you can find it here on your podcatcher if that's what you're listening through, but also you can find it on the web going to streetsblog.libsyn.com. Okay, before we get to the show, I want to let folks know that they can get this podcast and Talking Headways wherever you find your podcasts, including iHeartRadio, Spotify, Overcast, Pocket Cast, and of course, Apple Podcasts. Thanks to those folks who subscribe through podcatchers. It's awesome you guys keep coming back to the show. We really do appreciate it. Also, if you feel so inclined, please leave us a review on iTunes. We have lots of awesome reviews, but it's been a few years since we've had a rush of them. So if you get a chance, we'd love your feedback. Okay, the news. This comes from the stories that piqued our interest from the newsletter. The first set of stories are the ones that get the most interest from readers of the newsletter, and then there's a second section which got the most interest from me, which I think you might find interesting as well. All right, let's start out with the missing rung of housing. Until the 1980s, single-room occupancy buildings were an important part of the housing ecosystem, serving as an entry point for new residents and low-income people. But as older buildings were redeveloped and repurposed, legislation limited the ability to build new ones, creating an empty rung on the housing ladder. Now, model legislation has been written to allow SROs to be built again in cities and states around the country. This was by Andrew Justice in the Niskanen Center. Very interesting look at SROs in this article. I didn't quite understand kind of the history of them. There's a little bit of history in there. But it's interesting that we decided that they were no longer necessary. And part of the reason why we have such a problem with homelessness is there's no real cheap option for housing. And so this is kind of the lowest rung of housing you can, aside from like a motel, which a lot of those SROs were converted to motels. But the older buildings got redeveloped into buildings that could, I guess, sell for a higher price or rent for a higher rent. And it's really they've disappeared. And also I know in San Francisco now they're talking about, changing some of the homeless housing situation as well, in terms of, changing buildings, taking away some of those for reasons I'm not going to understand or go into at the moment because it's outside of my wheelhouse, but just interesting to think about what this history was like. And then also that people are thinking about this building type again. Older drivers not ready for non-driving future. Many older adults living in the suburbs are in denial about the future in which they cannot drive anymore. The topic is, of course, a hot button issue, and Lloyd Alter has seen increasing interest, not all positive, in his posts about the subject, proving the point of a recent poll that shows 54% of people 65 and older don't have a plan for when the time comes they can't drive. This was by Lloyd Alter and Carbon Upfront, and this is true. I mean, there's a lot of folks out there who think that they'll just be able to drive forever, and then they're driving and driving until they can't. And when they can't, they start to realize that they are stuck in their neighborhood because it's not accessible to anything. And it's frustrating, I think, for a lot of folks to feel that loss of mobility. But we've designed our neighborhoods and our systems to be like this, which is really frustrating. We've built all the sprawl. We've gotten to a situation where basically we're getting people stuck in their houses. My grandmother lived in Lafayette since 1963 till a few years ago. And, after she couldn't drive anymore, she was beholden to the local paratransit service or to family members coming to get her and take her to the grocery store, which is fine if you have family members that have time or, that also care about you. But also, like, there's folks out there that end up, losing their connections to their social networks, losing their connections to the hospital they go to or to the grocery store that they go to, and it becomes harder for them to get out. And so I think there's a lot of people who are kind of in denial about this. At some point, people are going to give up their keys because they can't drive anymore, because they can't see, or they're just not in shape to do so. And so what are they going to do? And unless you live in a walkable neighborhood, that means that you're going to be dependent on services like paratransit and other things that may or may not be very good in your neighborhood. And so Lloyd pointed this out, and there are a lot of people in social media that basically didn't believe him. They called him names. They said, you're never going to get me to live in a neighborhood of density, et cetera, et cetera. And it's not really about that per se. It's about good services, and especially transportation and the networks that can get people to where they go. And if you build all of these urban systems, suburban systems, I should say, that are basically built around the car, using something else than a car might be difficult. So it'll be interesting to see how this goes and how people act. Obviously, some people think that there's a technological solution with self-driving cars and that type of thing. I'm not so sure about that. I actually don't believe that that's actually going to be anything that's scaled up in a reasonable manner for most of the people in the United States. It tends to work most in urban areas because that's where the vehicles can make most money. But it's same thing with Uber. But when you get to those suburban and rural areas, it just doesn't make as much sense. Lessons from Japanese railway success. Japan is often recognized as having one of the best railway systems in the world, with 28% of passenger kilometers traveled on trains. While many claim that this is the result of the culture, it's actually the result of long-term public policy decisions. Additionally, Japan's railway companies are allowed to do more than just operate transit, often seeing their mission as building cities rather than building just a transit system. This was by Matthew Bornholt and Benedict Springbett in Works in Progress magazine. It was a really interesting article to read about this and some of the quotes from some presidents of these railway companies. And I'm sure a lot of people know about the history of the Japanese railway companies. They walk through that a little bit. I'm not as expert to say, but it was really fascinating to go in through and read some of that history. And then also the understanding about what these companies are allowed to do. They're allowed to build development. They're allowed to build the railways. They also have convenience stores and malls and all kinds of other commercial entities that they've created, which, makes them, put together a whole services and stuff. It's really fascinating. And linked together with some of the articles we posted previously about how some of these lines were built in terms of trying, public takings law and the way that they do it in Japan. It's really fascinating to think about the different direction that Japan has gone than many other countries in terms of expanding their railway system. So super interesting article. If you want to learn more about how Japanese railway have been so successful and how their city building efforts have been so successful, definitely check out this item in Works in Progress. Disappearing machine. The warehouse is not just a collector and dispenser of goods, but a trap that keeps people working in the logistics industry for low pay. Rebranded as fulfillment center, these warehouses allow companies like Amazon to capture markets that were once served by physical stores and workers, but no one actually knows the extent to which they or the logistics that undergird them exist, so the landscape is overbuilt. And the next move to put them to use is ICE detention centers, a disturbing evolution of the building type. This is by Charmaine Chua in Places Journal. I've seen a lot about the warehouses lately, and it's a little bit something that we talked about with Benjamin Fong, who's coming on the show on this Thursday. And it's a really interesting sub kind of genre of urbanism, thinking about how these logistics systems impact cities, how they impact transportation networks, but also the warehouses and how they've evolved as well. Super interesting kind of history about the warehouse and what it was early on, a place to store stuff, to what it is now, which is like this center of goods movement. And, previously, as Benjamin said in some of his articles, previously the logistics network was kind of pushed by these manufacturing companies in America, and they're the ones that kind of pushed and sold goods and services to people. But now it's kind of like the logistics services, like the Amazons and the Targets and the Walmarts of the world, are the ones actually driving the pushing of goods and services, and basically overcoming suppliers by brute force. So it's a really fascinating change in kind of the aspect and what that means for warehouses and what they're used for. Super interesting. So hopefully you'll join us on Thursday to hear more about that. What if cities onboarded like companies? People who move to new cities are looking for connections, but not always sure how to find it. Research has shown that corporate onboarding processes make new hires feel very connected with a new company. So what if cities did something similar in bringing in new residents? Cities are positioned to take the lead on bringing people into the community, but the process must be intentional. This was by Aaron Hurst in the National League of Cities. I thought about this a bit. What if we had these transit agency groups that basically found out when somebody moved into a new place, maybe it's through the utility bill gets changed or something along those lines, and they send you a welcome packet or they send you a welcome person, and the person goes to your front door and they can say, hey, okay, where do you work? Where do you live? And we can figure out the best way to get there using transit or bikes or anything else but your car. People can figure out how to get there in their car, but the best time to change people's habits is basically to get them when they're changing all kinds of other habits as well. So moving house is one measure. So when you do that, it might actually get more people to try to take transit, at least a little bit. They might go back to the car, who knows, but you're at least giving them the opportunity to understand that there's something more out there, which is really fascinating. No free-range parenting in the U.S. Stephanie Murray believes that when she moves back from the U.K. to the United States, the free-range style of parenting she currently enjoys will likely make way for more protectionism. Safetyism, or helicopter parenting, is often seen as a negative, but given bad urban design that encourages speeding and reckless driving and an increasing amount of urban disorder, Murray believes that the extra protection is warranted. This is by Stephanie Murray in the Dispatch. I'll say that personally, I live in a city where you can walk around. You can get places by bus. Obviously, my daughter is too young at this point, basically at that age where she probably shouldn't be going. She shouldn't be going on her own. But that's not to say that she couldn't do the old enough Japan challenge if really pushed, right? So that show that came on Netflix that has been showing in Japan for a really long time is called Old Enough. And basically the kids go and run errands for their parents. The camera crews are looking out for them and stuff, and it's really fascinating. But one of the things that I'm worried about the most when we're walking around, and I'm walking with her mostly, and her mom's walking with her sometimes as well. The thing that I'm worried about the most is cars and the dangers of vehicles, popping up on the curb because the driver is out of control, driving too fast, them not looking at intersections, those types of things. And small kids like we saw with the weird monster truck driving on the top of a Lamborghini. Small kids are smaller than that Lamborghini, and there's people that have these huge jacked up trucks that they can't see anything. And so you don't have a lot of that in San Francisco, but we have a lot of dangerous driving, and that scares me the most about that. And so I worry that I'm a helicopter parent in that way, trying to make sure that we don't get run over by cars. But I think some of the other things that she mentioned are in the article, like disorder, urban disorder, public drug use, public homelessness, those types of things. Some of those things, when you get into some of the other parts of the city, there's something that parents worry about. There's something that parents see and they don't want their kids to be exposed to. I feel like this is a discussion that's happening a lot lately. Her basic feeling is that in the UK, she can let her kids go to the store, or they can go to the neighborhood, park or whatever it is by themselves. But when they get back to the United States, it's not likely to be that way because of the way that the urban environment is designed, because of the ability of cars to go fast, because of the need to cross major roads, and because of some of that disorder as well. But mostly her discussion is about urban design. So I feel for that. Because I feel sometimes like, I can't be a parent like my parents were, which is like, you can walk to school, or you can go and play with your friends outside, or, go and ride a bike. It's a little bit easier, I guess, to ride a bike in the suburbs when you have a trail system that's really huge. When you have 85 miles of trails that don't cross a road, that's easy. We'll get to that when we release the Kingwood episode. But San Francisco is a really good walking city too. And I think that some of that stuff's really well founded. So that's a big fear for, I think, a lot of parents, is the urban design, the speed of people driving, the cars of it all. Okay, next up, city vibrations stopped during eclipse. During the 2024 solar eclipse, researchers wanted to test whether the hush that came over people during the eclipse was reflected in seismic data. What they found was similar to the first 2 months of the pandemic. Sounds from people, moving vehicles, and construction were limited for the short period of time the sun passed behind the moon, and the change was easily detected by seismic monitoring. This was by Seismological Society of America and ScienceDaily. Super interesting. I guess everybody stopped what they were doing. All the trucks and stuff stopped, and everything stopped, and so the seismic monitoring stations caught that, which is really fascinating. A parking enforcement legend, Grant Nakamura, has emerged as the most ruthless parking enforcement officer in Sacramento history. His 21,700 citations in 2025 bested the next best officer by 5,000. On his most legendary day, Nakamura handed out a whopping 107 citations. Drivers in Sacramento may not know his name, but they feel his presence if they try to break parking laws. This was by Ariane Lang in the Sacramento Bee. I love this superhero origin story of Grant Nakamura, the parking and enforcement officer from Sacramento. Fascinating that he's just like rifling off citations for parking regulations that were broken by drivers. The Ariana Lang wrote a somewhat humorous article about this, because I think she's an urban thinker herself, but it's really funny to see somebody valorized for something that many people would be frustrated by. But I like it. It's good. He's been upholding the law, which I think maybe we need more of lately. Waymo means more vehicles on the streets. New York City has $80,000. New York City has 80,000 app-based taxis on the streets, and a recent Uber earnings call suggests that more vehicles on the streets, the more people seek ride-hail services. Even as Waymo enters the market, the other companies don't see that as a problem, because trips have been increasing despite the claims of Waymo. The result is more traffic and the need to ask ourselves, what is a city for? This was by Sophia Lebowitz in Streetsblog New York City. Yeah, so basically Uber's saying like more Waymos, more cars, more desire for the service equals more cars on the street. And so that means more Waymos, more Ubers, more whatever other robo-taxi systems are out there, Zooxes, whatever else. And they don't see that as a problem because they want more cars on the street, which is never a good thing in a city. We don't want more cars in the streets. We want more walking and biking and space for people. But they, they always are trying to get the angle where they're like, oh, we're friends with transit, we're friends with cities, but actually they're just kind of like leeching off of cities, in my opinion. Just like Uber has over the last so many years that it's been operating. They're basically just using cities as their as their pocketbooks, and trying to extract as much value as possible from the value that's been generated from cities. And so this is another indication that they are just trying to clog the city with cars in order to make more money, which, I guess that's how capitalism works, but it's also at the negative detriment to those who live in cities. Okay, so that's all the news items that come from the most read items from the newsletter. But now we have the bonus items. These are the items that I thought were interesting that maybe you would think are interesting too. New research from researchers at King's College in London found that the boom and bust cycles of housing markets in 23 OECD countries are built into the system by undertaxing capital gains in addition to poor tenant protections. This leads to more speculation and more impactful cycles. So basically they're saying, like, if you don't tax capital gains from buying and selling real estate, for example, and you have poor tenant protections, people can get kicked out whenever, for any reason, then you have more speculation, which means more ups and downs and crashes and boom and bust cycles. And this is something that actually Daniel Wortel-Lundin talked about in the Promise of Prosperity, or like the Menace of Prosperity, I should say. That's his book, which is like a lot of the boom and bust cycles became because there was a lot of speculation that happened. So the speculation was allowed to go rampant in places like New York City during the Great Depression, before a number of things happened where we saw downturns in the economy, savings and loans crisis and things like that, where we got these like really high highs and really low lows. And so, if we had actually a more even keeled system, where we didn't allow as much speculation, you might have less cycling of highs and lows and more kind of even keel situation. New York Mayor Mamdani has created an Office of Curb Management to oversee 6,300 miles of public space that has mostly been given over to car storage. With increased space needs for other uses, a space rethink will be necessary. This was in Streetsblog New York City. Debit and credit fees for fare payments in the Bay Area are taking up a large amount of funds than previously expected. While Clipper users used to load a large sum onto a card and continuously use it, smaller transactions on personal credit cards and lower Clipper deposit amounts are ballooning fees. This is in SFGate. Yeah, so if you're using your credit card as a tap to pay instead of a Clipper card where you loaded a bunch of money, every one of those transactions gets taxed, or at least like not taxed, but it gets charged by the credit card companies. Whereas if you did a $30 charge, for example, you are charged on that initial charge, but you aren't charged for every time you use your card to pay up for 30 rides, for example, if like rides were $1. So all those charges actually hitting the Clipper card, or actually MTC, because the charges are going up because people are not reloading as much because the ease of using the system is much easier. So the credit card fees are going up for using these systems, which is something I didn't actually think about. It's interesting that this could be one of the side problems with folks being able to use their credit cards or use their Clipper cards to recharge faster and faster. In order to build more missing middle housing, Chris Hughes suggests we recalibrate the federal home loan banking system. Created during the Great Depression, this network has been turned away from its original mission and towards supporting big banks' liquidity. This was in the New York Times. Chris Hughes. Yeah, super interesting op-ed, and talked about basically how all of these home loan banking system banks were created to give people home loans, but now they're created, and get easy or low interest rates from the Fed. And what happened now is the big banks, they actually use them as ways to get lower rates for their banking system. And so much of the banking that happens is between banks and not between banks and borrowers specifically. So if we can reorganize this, it actually could make it easier to build housing, and especially missing middle housing because of the lower rates and things like that. So an interesting way to look at kind of housing finance and the things that are on the books that we could just kind of go back to that don't necessarily need a huge major lift to do. Local government staffing shortages are likely to make the housing shortage worse as permitting and approvals become longer processes. And it's unlikely to get better as 50% of local government employees are over 50 and many are expected to retire in the next 5 years. This was in Smart Cities Dive. New York Mayor Mamdani has announced plans for a city-owned grocery store in East Harlem. $30 million will be invested at the site of a marketplace first opened by Mayor Fiorella LaGuardia during the Depression. The new store would open up in 2029. This was in 6 square feet. Yeah, super interesting. I like this idea of grocery stores. We're talking a lot about grocery stores and competition and those types of things. When we had Stacey Mitchell on to talk about the Robinson-Patman Act and some other things. And so this is kind of, unless you're going to kind of push for, the breakup of groceries, big grocery chains, or enforce the Robinson-Patman Act and it allows more players into the system, this is the other way to do it by building your own grocery store to lower prices for people especially in food deserts that were created by the system that allowed Walmart and Target and others to grow and close down stores and, make sure that new stores didn't open in some of those places that are now not well served by groceries. After the removal of photo radar to catch speeders in Ottawa, more drivers are speeding in school zones than ever before. Compliance with the posted speed limit dropped from 87% to 67% just 1 week after enforcement ended. 12 weeks after, it dropped to 42%. Global news. So basically you turn off your camera enforcement and people start speeding again. And because the roads are designed for going faster. And that's a frustrating result. I know that one of the things was the Ford administration was complaining. They were saying it's just basically a piggy bank for cities, and these traffic ticket generators are for making money. But actually, they're actually keeping people from speeding, which is much safer. I know that there's a lot of frustration with cameras from drivers, but they are keeping people safe by reducing speeding, and in some ways, actually. Making sure that the funding is existing for transportation projects that will increase safety. So there's that too. Even after being told to imagine robo-taxis are 100% safe, 42% of people surveyed said they will not consider using one. Polls have shown many people are reticent to adopt or use the new technology. This is in The Verge. In arid regions of the Southwest, water conservation won't be enough to keep up with the impacts of climate change on supply, while expensive water recycling or desalination might be the only solution to water shortages in a warming world. So basically they said conservation can cut up to 25% of usage if it's implemented correctly, but you're not getting as much rain such that 25% will actually be over, the amount that the rain there is, if that makes sense. So basically there's more rain, there's less rain available than conservation can cut. And so we're going to need to create more fresh water for some of these cities and places probably in Southern California, in the Southwest, in Phoenix, and other cities. Kyle Paoletta came on the show to talk about some of this stuff when he talked about his book, and I found that really fascinating. There actually are cities that are doing 100% water recycling, which is really good, but there hasn't been as much rain, and so there's been droughts. The Rocky Mountains haven't been getting as much snow, and so some of that also is an issue too. So really fascinating to think about what it means to actually conserve, but also how much water we're actually going to need in the future. Finland has opened up with the world's longest car-free bridge. The bridge, which serves trams and bikes and pedestrians, is just over 3/4 of a mile long and connects the suburbs of Helsinki. Okay. Rising fuel prices from the war in Iran are having an impact on housing costs and affordability. The rise in energy costs will not just impact the construction of affordable housing, but the cost of keeping units heated and cooled as well. This was in Newsweek. And allegations against Amazon have surfaced a new type of monopoly power, the ability to raise prices to match competitors in order to create upward pressure on markets in addition to degrading real-world price signals that support fair markets. This is the basis for a trial set next March brought by 17 states against Amazon. This was by Stacey Mitchell in Washington Monthly. We just talked about her in terms of food deserts, but she's also watching for monopoly power. Really fascinating. Basically, Amazon raises prices to match competitors when their prices are higher in order to create some upward pressure on pricing in the market. So basically the pricing model that capitalism kind of benefits from, but Amazon has just kind of broken that. It kind of tracks, their algorithm allegedly tracks what other companies are selling their products for. And so they'll raise them to make sure that they can create less competition in the market. But also, they've also been following what other companies are, doing and lowering prices to create anti-competitive systems. It's super complicated. I don't know if I completely understand the algorithm and how it works, but it sounds horrible. It sounds horrible, at least in what I've read. This Washington Monthly article explains in good in detail. It can go a whole 250, 350, 400 words on the details. But I think it's a really good piece that shows kind of what they're doing. And also, these monopolies are crazy. These monopolies are really driving up prices, making things more expensive, and really anti-competitive, if I'm being honest. Okay, 2 more. Animals want to live in the areas where humans are most likely to settle, but urban development has cut off migration routes and favorable habitats. As more land is developed for housing and other development, large migratory animals suffer from loss of habitat, biodiversity, and pathways between open lands. This was in Biographic. This was by Ben Goldfarb, who wrote the book Crossings, which we reviewed on the show. We had Ben on the show. Really great article. And it makes sense when you're thinking about cities or towns in like Greater Colorado, for example. Like, it's really good for them even to have compact development because it actually allows for more wildlife corridors. Now, we think about that from an urban standpoint. It's good to have compact development because it reduces the need for sprawling services, reduces the need for need for driving a bunch. But also in rural areas, it's actually good to have more town centers as well because there's more habitat for these large animals to migrate. They were talking about one city where the zoning code allowed like one house for every 250 acres. And I was thinking about it from this perspective specifically. If you leave enough space for the animals, open range for them, you actually are protecting them. And it's much different than, say, if you're trying to protect the ability of people not to have housing near them. And so we have to think about it in that context when we're thinking about some of these more rural areas and the ability to preserve land for migratory routes for animals. Really fascinating stuff. And finally, as asphalt breaks down in the summer heat, it releases volatile organic compounds that can lead to dizziness and long-term health issues. New studies are looking into what the long-term effects are on road workers and the public, and potential solutions include using algae found in waste water as a binder that reduces the VOCs. This was by Arizona State University. We had Kenneth on to talk about asphalt. The episode is called Asphalt a number of years ago. And he made a compelling point that basically like laying asphalt on the road is actually not burning it. So it's like carbon capture. But in this instance, it sounds like some of that is a problem because it creates more volatile organic compounds that can really mess up your health, especially from a respiratory position. So interesting kind of counterpoint to that. And I think we probably could have known that this was something that wasn't the best. Asphalt is always kind of smelly and soft when it gets too hot, and it's easy to put down, I guess, but also can't be the best to cover up everything with asphalt. All right. This week and every week, I want to thank our generous Patreon supporters. You guys are awesome and keep the show going by listening and supporting each month. The show Talking Headways really wouldn't be here without you, so thank you very much. And you can support the show by going to patreon.com/theredwire. $1 a month will get you no ads for these podcasts. $2 a month will get you some stickers and a handwritten note. $10 a month will get you our scarf, of which you choose, so bus only or bike only. And we really appreciate those who have supported at the $10 level or more. The scarf folks, aficionados: Andrew, Ben, Derek, Gabriel, Glenn, Greg, James, Jeremy, Jim, Joseph, Catherine, Mao, Marcus, Matthew, Mike, Nicholas, Abraham, Oliver, Steve, Abby, Ed, Matthew, Sylvia, and recently added Andrew A. I'd love to update this list, so feel free to sign up at the $10 a month for Patreon. We'd really appreciate it. Also, I want to mention that we did produce an audiobook version of Raymond Unwin's 1909 classic, Town Planning and Practice. And if you want to get your hands on one, go to raymondunwin.com. This book is also available through your public library app, Libby. Listener questions and comments. If you have a comment or question, feel free to tweet at us or comment on any of the social sites where the podcast appears, or feel free to email us at theoverheadwire@gmail.com. Have any questions, shoot them over to theoverheadwire@gmail.com. And finally, puppies and butterflies. This is part of the show we talk about something fun, interesting, or maybe just didn't fit in other sections. Watched more of Mall Shadow Lord on Disney Plus. Maybe we'll talk more about the urbanism in this one as it's spectacular. Maybe we'll have Jeff Monowich come. May the 4th is coming soon, although we're not going to do a May the 4th episode this year, although we should. It's on a Monday. It's actually next Monday, May the 4th. May the 4th be with you. And you know me, I love Star Wars. I love all the stuff that comes out of that universe. I know there's a lot of opinions on it, but it's super fun. And just a lot of stuff going on in the city. Lots of really cool happenings. Also, just staying in. We watched Mary Poppins with my daughter yesterday, which is really fascinating. Look at how close the park is to the Poppins is to the kid's house. Can't remember the name of the family, but they're really close to the park. And then all the what's on in London, you know, and thinking about like chimney sweeping and what it might have been like back in the Victorian era when they were burning so much coal, how sooty and messy and all that stuff it must have been, and how clean it is now, amazingly. And it's such a weird but wonderful look back in time. And also, finally, a heads up, I'm going to do the keynote at Movability Austin in September. I'm really excited. I've been working on this presentation for a while, and I have like 3 hours worth of material, but I need to cut it down to like 35. But it's going to be great because I have lots of really interesting stuff to share, a lot of stuff you all have listened to on the podcast, obviously, but also some of my own thoughts as well. So definitely check it out if you get a chance. Okay, well, you can find me on Blue Sky, mostly, Mastodon, LinkedIn, Instagram, sometimes Threads, Substack, YouTube, and of course on my website and in your inbox every morning if you sign up for the newsletter. And if you want me on Flickr, you can find me at Transit Nerds. Everything else is at The Overhead Wire. You can find my writing at the Overhead Wire blog on the newsletter, and also it's cross-posted to the free version of Patreon, which if you're not a member of Patreon, by subscribing through a paid access, you can actually be on there for free as well, which I'll post some of the intros for the newsletter too. And you can find me on Substack as well. Too many places to post, too many fractured social media landscapes, but here we are. Thanks for joining us at Mondays at the Overhead Wire. Thanks to our generous Patreons for sponsoring this week's podcast, and we'll see you next time.
Talk